The Angel of the Odd. It was a chilly November afternoon. I had just consummated an unusually hearty dinner, of which the dyspeptic truff formed not the least important item, and was sitting alone in the dining room, with my feet upon the fender, and at my elbow a small table which I had rolled up to the fire, and upon which there were some apologies for dessert, with some miscellaneous bottles of wine, spirit, and liqueur. In the morning I had been reading Glover's Leonidas, Wilkie's Epigoniad, Lamartine's Pilgrimage, Barlow's Columbiad, Tuckerman's Sicily, and Griswold's Curiosities. I am willing to confess, therefore, that I now felt a little stupid. I made effort to arouse myself by aid of frequent Lafitte, and, all failing, I betook myself to a stray newspaper in despair. Having carefully perused the column of houses to let and the column of dogs lost, and then the two columns of wives and apprentices run away, I attacked with great resolution the editorial matter, and, reading it from beginning to end without understanding a syllable, conceived the possibility of its being Chinese, and so reread it from the end to the beginning, but with no more satisfactory result. Thus begins The Angel of the Odd by Edgar Allan Poe. This video will appear in two separate playlists here on the channel, number one being the Edgar Allan Poe playlist, but number two being the short story discussion playlist. We are finding this at the very tail end of October 2023. This video will have three separate parts. Number one, a So What Happened, a recap of the story. Number two, a lit crit portion, and finally a writer's corner portion. So, what happened in this, The Angel of the Odd? Our narrator becomes oddly incensed by reading about a strange death that he believes was completely fabricated by the author. He's a drunkard, also, our narrator. So, the Angel of the Odd starts talking to him, and the Angel of the Odd is constituted of wine bottles and a keg. So, what is this saying about the narrator being an alcoholic and etc.? But the angel says that the death in question was 100% totes real. Our narrator then gets rid of him, the Angel of Death, and decides to nap before going to a meeting to re-up his home insurance. Very important meeting. But he sleeps through it, having broken his clock, and he decides to just go to bed. But upon going to bed, he forgets to put out his candle, and the candle burns his house down. As he's escaping, a pig knocks over the ladder under the window, and he falls and breaks his arm. So he decides the next logical thing to do would be to get married. But both of these ventures go wrong as well. One, because she found out that he had a wig, and the second, I can't remember why, but it was also superfluous. Unfortunately, I did not write that down. I apologize. Each goes awry, so he decides to take himself out of rotation. He decides to opt out of tomorrow. These are terms that YouTube will not be too friendly towards, so I'm not going to use it. So he strips down and decides to take a one-way bath in a lake until a crow decides to grab his clothes and take off with them. Why this matters, it's hard to say, but he decides the logical thing to do would be to chase after said crow, and he falls off of a cliff instinctively, reaching out and grabbing onto whatever is there, and it turns out it is a rope. a rope hanging down from a hot air balloon. The angel of the odd then appears and makes him promise to take a pledge of allegiance, basically. And part of this is putting your hand over your pocket or something like that. And he can't do that because one of his arms is broken and the other is holding the rope. So the angel of the odd cuts the rope, and our speaker falls all the way down through the chimney of his old house, which has now been rebuilt. Never doubt the angel of the odd. So, there are a couple things that I think are worth talking about here in this short story. One of them is the irony of, okay, so let's just start here with these quotes. These are both from our speaker, who says, at 6, I had an appointment of consequence, which it was quite indispensable that I should keep. The policy of insurance for my dwelling house had expired the day before, and, some dispute having arisen, it was agreed that at 6 I should meet the board of directors of the company and settle the terms of a renewal. Okay, very important. These things are crucial. The very next paragraph, our speaker says this: my watch informed me that it was 7:30, and, of course, having slept 2 hours, I was too late for my appointment. It will make no difference, I said. I can call the office in the morning and apologize. This tells us a whole lot about our speaker in general. Our speaker in general is not the type to take things seriously, but neither is he a particularly funny individual. This is the type of individual who does not take things seriously while having no sense of humor. This is an individual who has lost the will for tomorrow in the first place. That is why that mechanism of deciding to take himself out of rotation comes so quickly. Now, at that point in the story, the speaker has lost an awful lot. But this type of personality that has this great big important thing to do, sleeps through it, and then decides, I'll just go to bed. That's an individual who is troubled in more ways than one. That is an individual who has reached the end of logic. That is an individual who has lost the use of irony, perhaps. Irony being one of the great tools of humankind. Having lost irony is taking a little bit of your humanity away. This is probably one of the only personality types about which this type of short story could be written, especially in the first person, because your narrator has to be at once connected enough to the things that your story has consequence, but simultaneously disconnected enough from the emotional draws of these things that they can be adequately communicated. If this were an extremely emotional person, you don't get this story because it's all emotion. If this is a person who is completely disconnected, someone who is too stoic, for example, you don't get this short story because the person never feels the urge to communicate. Many of Hemingway's narrators, for example, and I know I use Hemingway as an example a lot, but many of Hemingway's narrators would not be giving you the short story. right? They're very stoic, very reserved individuals. You would not be getting that story from them. Um, so I think that is fitting. The next thing I want to say about this from the lit crit sort of section is, where has this Poe been? So I understand that he has The Devil in the Belfry was a satirical piece as well. The Great Balloon Hoax is apparently a satirical piece. I have not read that. I have never read this tone from Poe. The Devil in the Belfry was not this expertly humorous. This reads almost like Mark Twain. The humor in this is not expressed by our speaker, but the writer trusts the reader to get it. This is something that is not always pulled off, and it's something that is possibly even more rare in its attempt. A lot of people try to make their humor explicit. Poe does not do that. And maybe that should have been partially a writer's corner note, but I think that it falls into the idea basket of lit crit because it is from the reading experience as opposed to the writing experience. From the writer's corner, there are only two notes that I really have from this short story. Number one, the avenues to death are numerous and strange. What a great quote. That's a tattoo. Edgar Allan Poe is not often, I don't believe, quotable in his fiction because he falls too much in love with commas and asides and but and alas, etc. So for this short story has two very quotable lines. The next one as well. I now considered it high time to die. And the fact that I now considered it high time to die is a statement that ends in a comma, makes that an even better tattoo, possibly, than the avenues to death are numerous and strange. Both of these would also make great titles, by the way. Hemingway, I think it was, said, all great titles come from Shakespeare, or something like that. Both of these would make great story titles as well. So I think that this short story can be instructive in a writing sense from the angle that this is not what we have come to expect from Edgar Allan Poe. But man, it's pretty good, right? This is not, it's not his best writing. It's not his tightest story. It is a story that seems to go ahead and do away with the idea of cause and effect. There is quite a bit of non-realism, if there is such a term to be had, falling from a hot air balloon through a chimney and living. The angel of the odd being so strangely constructed. All of these things. But stepping out on this branch like this is something that it reinvigorates, from a reader standpoint, interest in Poe. But one has to believe that from a writer standpoint, Poe being able to pin off something like this without the constraints of his normal fiction, it would be reinvigorating as a writer as well. And I'm all for that. I'm all for writing things that are not your average piece. I think that doing things like this, if you are a novelist, writing a poem once in a while helps you be a better novelist. If you are a poet, writing a short story sometimes helps you be a better poet, and the like. And that extends to changing up just the genres of your writing as well, satire versus the macabre. So that's all I have for this short story discussion. Again, this is in two separate playlists, the Edgar Allan Poe playlist as well as the short story playlist. If you enjoy or appreciate what I do on the channel, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing that I talk about on this channel, dropping 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes more videos each week, sometimes less. There's poetry every Monday, though, and I hope to have you back for the next one.